Long ago, I heard of a device that can be attached on the body and can change the vibrational state in order to heal. What do you know about something of this nature?
I have heard of lots of devices, and I know very little and don't pay a whole bunch of attention to them because, I know some people use crystals. I don't have any problem. I don't have any problem with anything. If you've got something that works, do it. But I really don't have any information about any machines. I've heard a lot. I've read about them. I don't know. I think that you can change with your mind anything that you could change with a machine.
What tools do you suggest to help us, to enable us to allow, to achieve true acceptance of the now?
Okay. There are a bunch, and we've mentioned some of them before. The first one is a regular daily meditation, only 15 minutes. Taking your time and allowing your mind to settle down is extremely important. It's a conditioning tool. The other tool that you can use as a conditioner is a gratitude journal. Constantly bringing up to your attention what you are grateful for. And in every situation, finding out what's good with it. And the third thing, which we're going to talk about a lot in our last few classes, is this idea of pivoting, and I hope you're reading about it in the book on emotions. It is the ability to catch yourself in the middle of a negative thought and say, do I really want this? And gradually turn it around. That process is the essential process. You can also do a lot of other things. You can use, with a proper person, things like Psych-K to help you get rid of some of those deeply held beliefs. There's another process that you can pretty much learn from the internet called EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique. There's a lot of these techniques that are basically based on energy. They're called energy psychology and energy medicine. I like to call what we do energy management. And we are energy, and managing that energy is part of what we need to do. So those are some of the tools, and you're going to get more.
And we'll be talking about gratefulness as a tool for deepening your spirituality and deepening your appreciation of life a great deal. We'll be talking about gratefulness, and it has children, it has kindness, and it has compassion, and it has joy. And that's what my next 4 weeks of series will be about, and how to make them part of the now all the time.
Being grateful isn't to do something for somebody else and nothing to do with them. It's for yourself. Putting yourself in a state of gratitude is for you, not for the other person. They may get some side benefit, and that's fine, but it's really for you.
Okay. What are some of the references that mind is perpendicular to time? Where can we learn more about it?
Well, we can get a scalpel and open my head, because that's where that stuff came out. The idea of the dimensions being perpendicular to each other is my own idea. I've never read it anyplace. And it came from looking at the first three. I noticed that, and it's very obvious from the slides I showed you, that one is perpendicular to the next. The first dimension is perpendicular to the second, and the second to the third. So I thought, well, if that's the way it goes, why wouldn't the fourth be perpendicular to the third, and so on? So that literally came out of my head, and it's a good model. There's no proof of it, but it's a good model, and it seems to me that's the way I know that things come out of mind and come into the time frame and come into our reality. That much I know from my own experience. So I would say that's basically an original idea.
Do some people calibrate at different levels?
It sounds like we're talking about David Hawkins. Is that the person that answered the question? If you're not familiar with him, David Hawkins is a person who talks about energy, and he has a calibration scale that he calibrates people at various people, things, situations, books, and everything else. I have some deep questions about the calibration system itself, because the calibration system is his opinion, his beliefs. You could have a person who really would maybe be thought by the average person to be really good, and you might not calibrate with them at all. How about, don't you have a friend who you really love and is really great, and they have another friend who you can't stand? How is that possible? You see, the only way you can calibrate anything against is your own feelings and your own thoughts. So I wouldn't use anybody's outside scale to calibrate. But you can certainly get an emotional read on it. If you're paying attention to people, just by observing their body language, you can see literally how they're feeling. And you don't have to go into their feeling, and you can change it if you want. Lauren and I's most fun thing we do is to go into a restaurant and find an upset, angry waitress or waiter. That's just like, oh, goody. And we have them turned around by the end of the day every time. Right before we leave, they are thinking things are wonderful. In every place I go, I do that. And I'm not doing it for them. Guess who I'm doing it for? Me. I had a lady in the bank the other day who was really upset. Kind of a rainy day, and I was making a big withdrawal, and she was writing me a cashier's check, and I could see she was just, shh. In fact, at first I went like this, like, doesn't this person know who they're talking to? And then oh, wait a minute. Do you know who you're talking to? And then I said, the check slipped out of her hand. I said, that's kind of a slippery check, isn't it? She says, everything is slippery today. And I said, well, it is. You know, the weather's been kind of bad. And I kind of went at her level, and we started talking about, well, the sun's coming out. And within 3 minutes, she was happy and jovial just by gradually bringing her around. Even though I had that initial, it caught me off guard. Wasn't expecting that. And it does. If it catches you off guard, fine. But you turn yourself, and then you help tell the other person. You don't turn them frontally. If someone says it's a rotten day, you don't say, oh, it's a great day. You're going to have resistance. You say, well, you know, it is. This part of the day really is rotten, and something else was rotten. But the good part was this. Well, yeah, that was good. You're turning them. You're turning them. And
it's your John Wayne turn.
Yeah. Remember the old movies where the stagecoach was running away and the driver had been shot? John Wayne is riding alongside the stagecoach to stop, and he rides up alongside the horses, and he jumps over on the horses, and then he gradually brings them into a turn and slows them down and stops them. He doesn't stand in front of the stagecoach and go whack and let it run him over. He goes with the flow and just gradually turn it. And you do the same thing with your own emotions. This procedure that you're reading about in the emotion book is exactly that. It's gradually turning your emotions, not trying to change from being really upset because you found out your daughter who you'd spent tens of thousands of dollars on just flunked out of college. You don't start by saying, well, everything's great. You say, well...
Say, at least she's not pregnant.
At least she's not pregnant, right? There you go. That's a wonderful thought. That's a good thought. Next.
I want to go just backpedal just a little bit. Dr. Deepak Chopra writes a great deal on the time-space continuum. And if you are interested in learning more, which was what your question was, I think, if you will go into a bookstore and find his books and look through the indices, you'll find the ones where he specifically talks about the time-space continuum, and it's very, very brilliant on the subject.
He has a movie out, too, that I saw, and I don't remember the name of it, but it shows him hitting a golf ball and the golf ball shimmering in and out of existence, and he's explaining this theory that we were talking about here.
If you put your hand on a red-hot stove element, isn't the pain now?
Certainly seems that way, doesn't it?
There's a difference between pain and suffering. Pain is to let you know that what you're doing is not to your benefit.
Take the hand off the stove
take the hand
before
off the stove.
You think about it.
If you put your hand on a hot stove and you hold it there, you are creating suffering. The pain is there to get you off of it. And I'll tell you, this is what you can do. Let's say that you just happened to touch something hot you didn't know and burned it. Do you know that through hypnosis, you can put a person under hypnosis and take a pencil eraser and put it on their hand and tell them it's a red-hot iron, and it'll erase a blister, and you can do the reverse. You can literally say, oops, there'll be no blister, and start thinking, literally one fellowship is put the pain back in the item. If you stub your toe, put it back into what you stubbed your toe on, or into this hole. Just literally transfer that energy, and you won't get the blister.
And I have to tell you, that putting the pain back in the thing you stubbed your toe on really, truly works. And you'd think somebody was just crazy. If you bump your toe and then back to the footstool you bumped it on, lay your foot against it and say, I am transferring the pain back into the footstool, it will be gone. It is amazing.
And that's being right on, catching it in the moment.
Now moment.
And you're catching it in that moment and shifting it, you can shift anything. And we're not taught that, but you can do that.
Since we're on the subject of pain, how can pain be an illusion if you're just coming out of major surgery?
Do you realize that you can put a person under hypnosis and they can have surgery and not feel any pain? And you could hypnotize a person who was feeling pain, if they would let you, they wouldn't feel pain. And you could literally talk them out of it if they believed you could. You can change the way they think and they will not feel the pain. Pain is mental. Pain is mental. Yes, when you stick the pin in your finger and it bleeds, you feel some pain. But the pain isn't coming from your finger. It's a signal coming from your brain, and that signal can be interrupted. If you believed it and said it won't hurt, it won't.
And it is people use biofeedback. There are lots of long-term things about interrupting pain.
There's a lot of people who do various techniques. Psych-K and EFT are things that can help you remove pain. I've seen demonstrations like an EFT where a person had a strong migraine headache that they always had and watched it in about 30 or 40 minutes be reduced to zero. And then when it came back later, they were able to use the technique over again and reduce it to zero. So remember, pain is a mental thing, and you can change it. And you're either going to experience it. The more you think about it, the worse the pain gets. Have you noticed that? The more you focus your attention, the worse it gets. So pain really, truly can be stopped in the moment if you can be that present to it. And you don't start learning it in the first time that you burn your hand. You start before you get there, and you practice so that when that event comes up, you're able to switch right away.
And if you don't think about it at all, it'll never come up.
Yeah.
It doesn't cross your mind, it won't happen.
How does the end of physical life relate to the time-space continuum?
I think the best example I could say is if you're watching a movie, okay, and you're the projectionist. I think I had a slide like this where the person had the projector on their head and they made a movie on the screen, and you're watching the movie. And have you ever gotten so into a movie that you could be tense or happy or cry? Does a movie make you cry sometimes? Nothing's happening, but lights are just flashing on the screen, and you're crying, or you're upset, or you're angry, or whatever it is. Because when you start to live the movie, it's just like it's a reality to you. Well, that's what physical life is. It's a movie. And it lasts for a time. And so we're the projectionists. We're the people who are out there in the audience watching the movie. And when the movie ends, we don't. We're still there. That's the end of that movie. And maybe, I don't know if we're reincarnation or not. I don't believe in, the reason I have a hard time with reincarnation is I don't believe in anything. I don't believe in time. So how can you anything? I think it's all happening at once anyway. I think you have access to every life that's ever been lived at some way. That we're all on, what's her name?
The matrix, the grid.
The grid, the field. What's the name of that writer?
The field. Oh, Lynn McTaggart.
Lynn McTaggart's book gives you a lot of explanation on this. But we're all on that energy field now as a part of it, as a vibration in it. And we're projecting into time-space. We're literally projecting into here, and we're having this experience. And there's things that you can do in time-space that you can't do out there on the grid. You can't experience pain out there. You can't experience winning and losing out there. You can't do a lot of things that you can do here. And that's why this is such a great adventure. That we can do
experience
this.
chocolate.
Yeah. That's why a lot of people come in.
Please explain the summarized story in easy-to-understand language.
The summarized story? The samurai.
Samurai story.
Okay, samurai, okay. Well, what happened in the samurai story was there was this fierce man who wanted to learn something, and his way of getting what he wanted was just to bulldoze and do it. He wanted to learn the difference between being awake, what we're talking about, being present, and being asleep, which most people are. He'd heard this idea. Well, of course, he was asleep. The way he was acting was proof he was asleep. So he comes to this this monk who was awake, and he demands to have an answer when the monk is doing something else. So the monk insults him.
And he's fully ego-centered. So
Yeah.
insulting him was the worst thing he could do.
The samurai is totally ego-centered. The monk is not ego-centered. The monk is so awake he knows what will turn this guy into a rage, and he does. And the samurai is about ready to cut the monk in half. And just before the sword starts to come towards him, he says, "That's being asleep." He asks the question, the difference between being awake and asleep. And he's stunned. The samurai is stunned. And then he has a realization. My God, I almost cut this guy in half. And he knew that. He knew I would cut him in half. He knew who I was. He knew what I'd do. But he risked his life just to teach me what being asleep was. And he was so grateful. His whole attitude changed. He became loving and kind. And he thanked the monk. You get into the right state. And he says, "Oh, that's what's being awake." That's the difference. And that story is meant to illustrate that point. I hope that cleared it up for whoever.
How do you explain, through the law of attraction, genetic predispositions, i.e. children born with fatal diseases or massive deaths, 911 or tsunamis?
Let's talk about genetic predispositions. According to Bruce Lipton, who's a friend of ours and who's a biologist, cellular biologist, you can change your genes by the way you think. So there is no such thing as predisposition. There is predirection. You can come in with bad genes, and through the right thinking, they can be changed. According to Bruce Lipton, who's a cellular biologist, a PhD, who lectures all over the country on the subject, who wrote the book, The Biology of Belief, and I really would read that book if you want to find out more to the answer to that question. There is nothing that is predisposition that can't be changed. Now, we come in with an agenda. I think we all come in with an agenda. And let's take Down syndrome. This is one of the types of things that I think that you're asking the question about. How many of you really gotten to know any Down syndrome children? What are they like? They're happy. They're loving. Every one of them. I haven't found any that's otherwise. What do you think they're here to teach? Love. They're here to teach love. And so a family that needs to learn love literally brings one of these children in to love them, and they play the part of this disabled person in order to practice the art of love. So whenever I see any child or adult who has some kind of terrible affliction, I don't ever think of them as having something wrong with them. I think of them as having their experience. And if there's any way I could do something for them in their experience, I would. But I wouldn't go and try to change them and say there's something wrong with them. There's something wrong with our thinking. If someone has one leg, they're here to experience that. Could they grow another one? Yeah. Charles Fillmore, who had a disease when he was 12 years old, his one leg was 3 inches shorter than the other. And he started to use affirmations later in his life, much later, and got 2 inches on it. And there have been cases where arms have grown out, little bitty ones. If we knew enough, we could regenerate any part of our body. We just are, we're in a way, folks, we're really cavemen when it comes to thinking, and cave women. We are not there, but it's time. I think we're in a place where the world is shifting, and this thinking is going to come to the forefront. And you are the leading edge of that. There is a shift happening. So in any case where there's a person that you're going to call disabled, I would never call them that, ever. They are differently abled, might be a way. They have different skills. And the one group I think that we've really missed the boat on is autistic children. I think that they are special. I think that they are, almost all of them have very high intellects. And How does a deaf person, why are they handicapped? Why is Marlene Maton handicapped? She can dance better than anybody else.
Won an Academy Award.
What? That's not a handicap. That's just a different way of doing it. It's our judgmentalness that makes it wrong.
There was a wonderful lady on television not long ago that had adopted 5 severely handicapped children, 2 young women without any legs that moved around on their arms all the time in such a fashion that it was absolutely astonishing. But she said, my children don't have disabilities. They have other abilities. And they're here to teach me, and I have never been as happy as I have been since I've been their student. It was really quite a remarkable lady.
Second part of that question was, how does the law of attraction play into disasters like 911 or
Let's talk about death, because everybody makes a choice at some level when they die. Everybody. What is interesting about that 9/11 experience is that under ordinary circumstances there would have been 8,000 people there, and there were so many absentees, it was just beyond mathematics that would happen. So people, didn't come in, whatever it may be. The ones that weren't ready didn't go. You will never get on an airplane that crashes unless that's your decision at some level or anything else. And if you didn't have a fear of death for yourself first, and then for anybody else, okay, that's just when he chose to leave. That's just when he chose to leave. One person stays to 110, another person stays to 3. That's all.
If you're really interested in the phenomena of why people come together to die in a certain place, there are numbers of books and studies done on this. And we had a really interesting experience in Kansas City. There was, some of you will remember, there was a hotel there that a huge balcony, or actually a bridge in the very large entryway collapsed during a tea dance. And not only were the people on the bridge killed, but the people under the bridge were killed. We knew a lady she and her fiance danced there every Friday night at the same time. And they went that night, and as they started to dance, they looked around and she said, nobody that we know is here tonight. And he said, I know, isn't that funny? We just don't know. Well, why? I guess we won't stay either. And they left and went to dinner, and the bridge collapsed. They found out that all those people had come from some other place to converge in that spot at one time. None of the regular people in all of this huge city that usually dance there every week were there, not one. And so there is something about people coming together for a particular experience, a hurricane, a tsunami, a disaster, a plane crash, any kind of major disaster like that, and nobody knows the answers to it. All they're doing is looking at the amazement of it. But I can tell you a really funny story. Years ago, I used to sell condominiums out on the beach. Before that, I had a newspaper that served condominiums specifically that I edited. And I noticed on my own that there would be they'd put up a sales office out on the beach. They're now all condominiums, but they used to just be blank spaces with little trailers and blueprints. And people would come in and buy these condominiums off the blueprint, all the way from Clearwater Beach down to, say, North Reddington Beach. But when condominium associations were formed, in this condominium would be all the same people who wanted a lot of rules and regulations and everybody patrolling and watching to what was going on. This condominium next door would be just full of people that didn't want any rules and regulations. Somehow from the blueprint, they knew what kinds of people they were going to want to share that condominium with. If somebody accidentally got in the wrong one, believe me, they sold out and went to the one next door. But that happened rarely, because by the time I got to know about that, I had moved into the real estate business, and I moved a few of those folks out. But it was just amazing that when you go to look at the rules and regulations and the way the place was run, they'd all found their right community.
This law of attraction works even when you are not aware of it. In fact, unfortunately, it does work when you're not aware of it. But the key here is, why not become aware of it and make it go the way you want it, instead of just by rote and by what you've always thought.
A situation arises and a decision needs to be made by a number of family members. We seek different solutions and cannot agree on one decision. What do I do as an individual to resolve the situation and come to a decision?
You get an AK-47 and tell them who's boss.
Now that's being asleep.
Yeah, that's it. That is the perfect opportunity for someone who's awake. Let's say that there's a family, this is a couple of adult children and a mother and father, and there's all this clash going on. Let's say that only one of them is awake. They're all asleep but the one who's awake could start to say, this is a conflict we're having here in our family. I would really prefer it not to be a conflict, but this is a conflict. I recognize it. It's a conflict. And I have no idea how to solve it. And I have particular ideas. I've already expressed them. Nobody likes my ideas. But I don't have no way to resolve this. But I know that the higher part of me does have a way. So I'm going to just kind of back off and let things play out, and I'm going to see what happens. And then I'll be given, usually, questions. Well, what if this happened? Nobody's thought of that. They say, oh, we never thought of that. And before you know it, with just one awake person, you can get the discussion going, and you can always come to an agreement. Always. Unless there's too much ego. When a person's stuck in ego, they can't, because they're not trying to get a solution. They're trying to prove their ego is right. You can't change their ego, but you don't have to show yours. Did we tell them about the names of our egos?
I don't know, Igor, did we?
we put names on them because we'd see them come out. Oh. And what was yours?
What is my ego's
name? Sam. Yosemite Sam.
My ego's name is Yosemite Sam. You know that little guy with the guns that shoots from the hip? His mouth is yapping and his head is this high. That's exactly what I'm like when my ego's in control. And I just don't make any sense, and I'm just telling everybody off, and I'm yapping all the time. And he's about this high, and he's very noisy.
Well, I decided to name my ego Igor, because ego and Igor start with the same letter. And my wife, who could spell, said, don't you understand that Igor starts with an I? And I said, yes, and what do you think ego starts with?
It isn't easy being married to John. Got to be tough.
Don't worry about someone else. You get your stuff solved in that situation. That's all you have to do. The rest will work out. Just get your stuff. Take responsibility and do your stuff. I don't mean kowtow. I don't mean placate. I mean simply recognize for yourself where you are stuck in this situation and remove yourself and be open to inner guidance. Sooner or later it'll work out.
And unless you have a deadline, like there's a lien on a property or something, if you can take your mind off it for a little while, you'll get a new perspective. The more you hassle it over and think about it and think about the personalities, and she doesn't like this and he doesn't like that, and I wish he was like this, and I wish she was like that, and if only I could do this, you're just creating more and more and more of a tangle and a mess. You know, if you're caught in a net, they say that if you will just lie still for a few minutes, you'll be able to figure out how to get out of the net. But as long as you keep thrashing in the net, it just gets tighter and tighter and gets around you worse and worse. So if you can extricate yourself, not necessarily physically, but mentally from the situation, stop thinking about it for a little while, and let it rest a little bit, then bright ideas will come that'll make you the peacemaker, and you can be the peacemaker. And being the peacemaker doesn't mean everybody else gets what they want and you don't.
Being the peacemaker means you're at peace, no matter what happens.
That's all it means.
And that peace will spread to the other members, particularly when you're close to them.
Could it be that the crop circle formations over the earth is a vibrational imprint of pure consciousness manifesting on our earth?
Anything is possible. I have absolutely no idea what causes crop circles. None whatsoever.
Or whose consciousness might be caused.
Right. No way to tell. And they're interesting. I think crop circles are interesting, and I'd like to see more research done on them and find out what they are. They can be anything, but don't jump to any conclusions. They could be a farmer with a big flat thing he's pulling around, or they could be energy. They could be anything. They could be a bunch of tired plants laying down.
Could be vibration under the earth somehow, a little earthquake. I mean, lots of possibilities.
Don't know.
How does one get a lock on reality? Don't our feelings sometimes mislead us, or is that just another lesson opportunity?
Oh, yes to the last part of it.
A lock on reality.
A lock on reality. You'll never get a lock on reality.
There really is no reality.
There is no reality except what you make up. So getting a lock on it is just going to put you down. Reality is misunderstood because most of us think that there is a reality. That if we could just find that reality, if we could just live by the reality. What was it the comedian said that reality is that which, when you get in touch with it, drives you crazy?
That was Lily Tomlin.
Well, yes.
Reality is that which, when you get in touch with it, drives you mad.
You are making up your own personal reality. Everybody else is making up theirs. And then you have this joint, agreed upon reality. All right? And but the idea of trying to get to reality is out there. Reality is out there. You're trying to get to yourself to project what you want in your life, not to find out what somebody else thinks or does or what's real. What's real is what you make real. There was a wonderful book written by Viktor Frankl called Man's Search for Meaning. And it's a book about his experience in the concentration camps in Nazi Germany. And how his experience, when you read the book, it's a hard book to read because you can't believe that people would sink to doing such horrible things as they did to them, and what the response of the prisoners was. And there were things that you just couldn't believe anybody could live under those conditions, but they did. The name of the book was Man's Search for Reality. I was at the time, Man's Search for Meaning. And I've always searched for the meaning of life for a long, long time. I'm not doing it anymore. And I realized two things. One, that there is no meaning. There is no meaning to anything. And yet I realized that all the people I saw who had happy lives, it was based on something meaningful to them. So it was a paradox. Nothing has an intrinsic meaning. Nothing has an intrinsic meaning. And yet a life without meaning is meaningless. It was left with only one conclusion. We bring the meaning. We bring the meaning. What's the meaning of life? What do you make it mean? And that was clear from that book.
I give you a real physical example of this. David and I are here in the same moment, same reality, if there is a reality. We're talking to each other. We're in the middle of a filming. There's an audience going on. John is here. But David, you look at me and then what you see beyond me and tell me what this real moment looks like to you. You see.
If I look beyond you, I see John.
And a plant.
And a plant.
And a canvas.
A wooden screen, some candles.
Okay, but in my reality, there's a tree and a screen and a piano and a camera and windows. This is the same moment, but if you ask us to describe it, you wouldn't know we were in the same place. So David is having his reality of this moment. I'm having my reality, and some of it is based on I'm looking at a man in a gray shirt and pants. He's looking at a woman in black clothes and gray hair. There are different realities, and yet it's the same moment. So anybody who tries to tell you what their reality is, it's not ever going to be the same as your reality. Nobody's looking out of your eyes. Nobody's seeing things the way you are. So getting a grip on reality is just understanding that you're having an experience and living the best experience you can live.
If you could summarize tonight's message in one sentence, what would it be?
Guilty. No. It would be this. That we are energy, and we're responsible for the vibrational level of that energy, and we can literally have the experience we choose if we're willing to realize and work with that energy. It's all about vibrations.
You did one sentence with 4 ands and an if. That's pretty good for you.